Sheikh Abdul Qadir was no ordinary scholar. He possessed a deep spiritual foresight and discernment. It was a unique ability, attested by his peers, to perceive truth beneath illusion and make highly accurate moral decisions. He realized that 12th century Baghdad did not lack legal scholars, moral rhetoric, or religious rulings. The problem wasn't a deficit of information, but a divorce between knowledge and action. Society understood right from wrong, yet refused to live by it. A wealthy man knew he should give charity, yet closed his hand and his heart to the poor. Rulers abandoned their responsibilities to their subjects. Even ordinary citizens resorted to cheating and lying just to survive, driven by a hyper-competitive world where moral integrity felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. The ultimate casualties were those with no power to defend themselves: the poor, the orphans, the widows, and the marginalized. Left to suffer in the shadows, they had no one to champion their cause. Baghdad's crisis proved a painful truth. The law alone cannot create a moral society, so the question was, what does? To understand his brilliance, we must look closely at how Sheikh Abdul Qadir acted, a vital historical lesson that many Muslims overlook. He acutely diagnosed the crisis of 12th century Baghdad, yet chose to transform society without tearing down its existing institutions. Instead, acting like an antidote introduced into a failing body, he quietly supplied what was missing at the very roots of society, triggering a spiritual revolution that reshaped Baghdad and ultimately the world. He saw exactly what the institutions of his time were missing. The first issue was proximity. The legal schools were completely disconnected from the people. There were plenty of scholars, but their work was mostly academic or procedural. It wasn't built for the real world. Scholars were supposed to be a mercy to the poor by living among them, fighting for them, and changing their circumstances. Instead, they saw themselves as mere gatekeepers of knowledge, passing down information that had no real functional value. Second, he noticed that many scholars were fundamentally compromised. Even those who assumed they were neutral were quietly swayed by state influence and special privileges. They found themselves internally conflicted, maintaining an outward demeanor of objectivity, while secretly their independence slowly eroded from within. Third, he also observed that there was a structural problem with the guardians of Islam, the scholars themselves. A system of rules is only as good as its interpreters, but the institutions of Baghdad were mostly training the intellect while completely ignoring the heart. They taught the law, but they didn't specialize in character. This left scholars totally vulnerable to fear, pride, and ambition. Without a structural requirement that cultivates humility, service, and courage under pressure, ethics became nothing more than empty words. The scholars conveniently learned how to use the vocabulary of morality, but because their internal character was never formed, they kept chasing the exact same corrupt incentives as everyone else. Fourth, he diagnosed a deeper philosophical crisis. Society had fundamentally misunderstood the true purpose of the law. The presence of Islamic law is often treated as a guarantee that a moral order will follow automatically. When injustice thrives, we assume the fault lies entirely with the corrupt individuals who fail to enforce or obey it. The reality is, law alone cannot produce a moral citizenry. A moral society is forged by active individuals who embody virtue. The law was never meant to be the ceiling of human behavior. It was the floor. It was a red line, a safety net of boundaries that society must not cross, while true morality existed far above and beyond it. In Baghdad, and even today, this confusion had become an epidemic. A wealthy employer, for instance, could legally pay his workers a pittance based on a contract signed out of sheer desperation. Even while pocketing massive profits and knowing the wage couldn't cover basic living expenses, he was technically within his legal rights. The rich lived in absolute comfort, hiding behind the letter of the law while completely abandoning the spirit of brotherhood. Fifth, he saw a major structural trap built into every empire. A state has to operate through layers of abstraction. A caliph can't do it all. He needs a massive administration, ministers, courts, and institutions to act on his behalf. But here is the structural flaw. Over time, those bureaucratic layers always drift. They become coercive. They start protecting their own interests instead of the people. The Sheikh understood that this was inevitable. It didn't matter if the guy at the top was a good man or a bad man. It was an unavoidable flaw of running a state through proxies. You couldn't fix the machine from the top down. The only solution was to work beneath it and change the reality on the ground. To counter these systemic issues, the Sheikh purposefully structured his school around core features designed to combat each point. First, following the prophetic model of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he deeply embedded himself among the poor and marginalized to serve as a direct source of mercy for them. He strictly instilled this ethos of social awareness and service into his students. In his book, The Sublime Revelations, Sheikh Abdul Qadir is recorded as saying, "The beggar is the gift of Allah Almighty, and you are capable of giving to him. So how can you send the gift back to its giver? In my presence you listen and shed tears. But when the poor person comes along, your heart turns hard. This goes to show that your tears and your attention were not sincerely for Allah Almighty." Secondly, when dealing with rulers, statesmen, government officials, and especially the wealthy, the Sheikh trained his students and the public to maintain a distinct wariness toward them, emphasizing that they are not the ones to be followed. Instead, a Muslim must listen to ethical scholars, those who are deeply embedded in the plight of the disadvantaged, and who speak truth to power for the betterment of themselves and Islamic civilization. In another instance, the Sheikh said, "O young man, do not trade religion for figs. Do not trade your religion for the figs of sultans, kings, and wealthy people, or for a morsel of haram food. If you eat at the expense of your religion, your heart will turn black. And how could it not turn black when you are worshipping creatures?" Third, he addressed the structural problem of how corrupt scholars obstructed the transmission of legal rulings that actually benefited the public. He recognized that because a scholar plays a crucial role in shaping a morally just and ethical society, they must first undergo rigorous internal purification. The ultimate litmus test was whether the scholar actually embodied an ethical and moral life. Did he stand against injustice? Did he risk his own safety against powerful figures who sought to exploit the marginalized? Consequently, he trained his students that any scholar unwilling to practice the principles of the Quran was entirely unworthy of their attention. He said, "Those scholars who put their learning into practice are the deputies of the venerable Salaf. They are the heirs of the prophets and the remnants of the worthy successors. They shall be assembled on the day of resurrection, they and the prophets, peace be upon them, together, to receive their reward in full from their Lord. As for the scholar who does not put his knowledge into practice, Allah Almighty has compared him to a donkey, for he has said, their likeness is as the likeness of a donkey carrying books." Fourth, he addressed how the law had been degraded from a vehicle of profound morality into a mere checklist of rigid legal limits, reviving its true ethical spirit through his own living example of serving the poor. To achieve this, he instilled this transformative principle of service within his students, framing it as the ultimate test of their faith. He said, "O young man, if there is any difference in your attitude toward people who approach you, depending on whether they are rich or poor, there is no salvation for you. You should receive the poor, who are patient, with respectful hospitality, regard them as a blessing, and rejoice in the opportunity to meet them and sit in their company." Fifth, recognizing that all states eventually become corrupt and coercive, Sheikh Abdul Qadir intentionally designed an institution with absolutely no ambitions for power. By relying primarily on volunteers, embedding itself among the poor and serving humanity through its leader's example, the institution built a structural deterrent against the allure of political influence. Through his school, he taught that a scholar's primary duty is moral and ethical, to remain deeply attuned to the masses while working to mitigate societal harm. While he would address those in power when necessary, his core philosophy remained that true transformation begins from the bottom up. This dual approach achieved two profound outcomes. First, because the Sheikh bypassed any pursuit of political power, his institution operated entirely beneath the radar of the coercive state, posing no threat to the ruling elite. Paradoxically, this non-threatening stance was so powerful that some elites completely changed their ways simply by observing him. Second, his school served as both a piercing indictment and a corrective model for compromised scholars. While knowledgeable scholars were rare, a deeply moral and ethical scholar was priceless. By providing a living example of a fearless, moral individual, Sheikh Abdul Qadir's sheer presence and focus elevated everyone around him, especially the poor and disadvantaged. He firmly believed that when Muslims prioritize self-purification and uplift the marginalized through Islamic character, society naturally and rapidly transforms. This is really just a glimpse into the incredible life and legacy of Sheikh Abdul Qadir. There's so much more to his story. Please like, share, and follow for more deep dives like this. Your support helps us keep these vital narratives alive.